are probably one of the few people that gets to do all these great, interviews with the basketball team and the football team, and like Mark Stoops, and what's it like just getting the green light to ask like Oscar Tshiebwe, like, pretty much anything you want? Like, what's it like preparing for those interviews and getting to do those?
I love this question. That's a really good question. Thank you. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think a version of the question that I've had to think a lot about over the years is like people always ask, like, oh, do you still get nervous? And I think people are surprised when I say yes, because like to an extent, you do it so much, you're not nervous anymore, right? Like I did 100 interviews with Oscar, whether if you count post game press conferences and pre-game sideline conversations and him coming onto our show, like you're not nervous to talk to him necessarily at that point. You're around these people so much, and you realize like, oh, they're 19-year-old college students or whatever, but they're obviously much bigger in stature than they are when you really are like, oh, this is just some dude in college. But I get nervous because I always want to do a good job, and I'm a perfectionist. I'm hard on myself. I'm a planner. And so
Yeah.
for me, like so much goes into these interviews in terms of like, I'm a part of this group called Galvanize, right? So it's a group for women in sports, basically. And I got great advice from our sort of leader, everyone, that we look up to. And she's the one who really started the whole organization, is Laura Achman, who's a sideline reporter for Fox Sports and has been in the industry for so long and is just honestly one of the greatest people alive. And she gave us this advice a couple of years ago at like sort of a conference we had gone to about how to prepare for interviews. And her advice is to go find every other interview you could with that person. Watch every interview they've done, listen to every interview they've done, read every interview they've done, and really try to figure out like, what are they interested in talking about? What made their eyes light up? What story did they want to tell? And of course, you're not always able to do that, right? Sometimes you're there to talk
Mm-hmm.
about the game or to talk about this one big story that's happening. But if you're able to really dig into these people and figure out their why and not just the what, and it sounds kind of cheesy, but when you think about like the kind of interviews that you've watched on Sundays, before an NFL game or during the NBA championships, the ones you remember are the ones that are impactful and they're in depth and you can tell that they were well researched. And yeah, I'm not going to lie and say I do that every single time now. I mean, I interview somebody every day for my job. I just can't. But
Yeah.
anytime we have the opportunity to do any sort of feature or sit down or profile, anything that's going to be a little bit more in depth than your standard, 2 questions after a game, I do try really hard to figure out, what's the angle we're taking and how can I construct questions that let them know that I'm prepared. Because the more
Mm-hmm.
prepared you are, the more open your interview subjects tend to be, right? If you go in and you ask JJ Weaver, like, if you have no idea that he has a 6th finger or that his
Yeah.
dad was murdered or, like all of these things are what makes him who he is right now. And all of those things go into his motivation for the season ahead. And he came to mind because we talk about him a lot on our show tonight. That's sort of the plan for 7:30 is to talk about JJ's season. But you can't talk about JJ's season with him if you don't know everything that's gone into where he is now and who he is at this point in his life. So I think that is how I prepare for these interviews. And that's why I still get nervous, because I want to do a good job and I want whoever I'm interviewing to be comfortable. I want them to be happy, with what they're able to tell the fan base, because that's really ultimately who these interviews are for with our show. And I want the fan base to like it. Not every story is like happy go lucky, like you're going to fall in love with this guy, but when they can be kind of personal and interesting and maybe a story you haven't heard before, I think that's the best way to do it. And so I hope I answered your question.
Oh yeah, absolutely.